Hello, thanks for being with us on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Not normally on Thursday, but we're not normally live Thursday night. We're not dumb, though, with the World Series and the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. We're coming to you at a special 7:30 time slot. We're going to have a quick pace show today, get to all the things you need to know, and then get you on to your entertainment tonight on the proper television. Although if you want to, you can still participate in the conversation. The chat is open. We'll be taking some questions tonight, but let's get to it. No more time. It's the BWI Daily Edition. Here they are, the stars of tonight's show, Sean Fitz, Nate Bauer, our regular crew on Thursday night. Gentlemen, thank you for working with us today. I know that it's been a very hectic week, starting with Halloween and having a lot of stuff going on this week. So thanks for accommodating the change and going live tonight on a very busy Thursday night. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Yeah, Monday was trick or treat, so we had to get that out of the way. Fatherly responsibilities come first, and then the live show. So we're happy to be here. We're trying to get it out of the way before the Phillies start, before the Eagles start, before all of Philadelphia abandons our YouTube channel. But before you do, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and such. I got it in. So everybody, welcome to the show. Nate, good to talk to you. I know it's been quite a week. We've talked a lot about quarterbacks.
We have
not a lot about Indiana's quarterback per se, but that's kind of where we're at coming out of James Franklin. Tuesday, Wednesday, all quarterback talk all the time.
Yeah, Nate, I want to start with you on that. I don't have a question. I just want to give the statement that 8 of 16 questions on Tuesday and then several more on Wednesday had to deal directly or indirectly with Sean Clifford and possibly going to the bench. I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this, so the stage is yours.
I do.
Please, tell us.
I feel like I should have prepared remarks so that I don't go completely off the rails. So here it goes. Let's start with a common ground here, right? I understand where Penn State fans are coming from. Two losses at this point in the season against the two teams that are the best in your side of the division. All of the things add up, right? It's Penn State's not going to the college football playoff. That is out. Even if Penn State wins the rest of its games, all of which are against lesser inferior opponents, right? I mean, we can pretty honestly say that Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State, they don't really scare you, certainly on the level that a Michigan or an Ohio State do. I get it. I get all of it. But there are these flashing red lights as to why James Franklin is doing what he's doing, why Penn State is continuing to play Sean Clifford. And so when all the questions coming out of the game on Saturday, a loss for Penn State, were about whether or not they would make that move, like his response was, it's something that we evaluate every week. He acknowledged the conversation. He acknowledged that it was something that they did, right? That he talked to Manny Diaz, people with head coaching experience. He talked to Mike Yursich, he talked to Danny O'Brien, and he talked to Ken Wisenhunt, who's an analyst and former NFL coach. And he didn't come outright and say it because these are the things that he doesn't come outright and say, but they're going to stick with Sean Clifford because they value winning football games, right? They are placing a priority on finishing the season at 10-2, the regular season, if they possibly can. And so it's, on the one hand, Sean Clifford being good, right? Which is absolutely fine for people to object to and for people to debate. Like, no argument from me. That's fine. But also there's an underside to it and something that James Franklin can't say that just seems to be missing in the equation in people's imaginations about this, which is Drew Allar just might not be ready. Like he just might not be at that point, and also shouldn't necessarily be expected to be at that point in his career. And also James Franklin doesn't talk about injuries, right? Guess what the other side of all of the questions this week were about? Penn State's injured offensive line. Are you going to put your stud quarterback, the guy who you see as the future of Penn State football at quarterback, in harm's way in harm's way in a position where you already don't necessarily feel like he's up to the task the way that these other guys can? Probably not. and so it's just hard, I feel like, for people to come to terms with the notion that, one, they're going to continue to operate
that this is
as
it, right?
that
So
this is the guy.
this is it. Like that there is no other track, and that if you are pushing for Drew Aller, you're pushing for an imaginary future that doesn't exist, is kind of what you're saying. Somebody asked me this week, actually it was just today, should they go to Drew Aller? And I had a similar response. But on the other hand, like, I deal in what I see on the football field, and I have not seen anything of Drew Aller to know what he's good and not good at this point. And I think your point here is that fans don't either. They just assume that it's going to be better because it's not Sean Clifford. Sean, do you have any follow-up to this particular conversation that we have? I feel like we have drilled this well dry, but there's always more coming out of it. So do you have any additional thoughts on Sean Clifford and the conversation this week around the quarterback?
I think I might be ceding my time to Mr. Bauer because I don't think he was done yet. That was impassionate. You say you didn't have prepared speeches. I just had visions of you talking to the mirror today, saying those same things. I will add another thing, and I know I wasn't around for camp this year because I was not employed at that point, and for a couple different reasons, but I definitely checked in with people. And the interesting thing here is Drew was solid in camp. He did a good job for a freshman in camp. I think was a little bit more with the completion percentage. I think James Franklin's talked about this, but a little bit more with the completion percentage than Christian Veillere and things like that. He did a nice job in camp. Then he came into the games, Purdue early season games, and looked like legitimately good. That wasn't what he did in camp. Like, he was better in those games than he was in camp, and that's awesome. I mean, I'd rather have you be good in games than in practice. But I think it kind of surprised some people. But I don't think it gave an accurate depiction of the 6 to 8 weeks beforehand of him picking up the offense and of him doing all this sort of thing. So maybe too much too soon. It's great that he performed well, but maybe a little bit too much. I think he probably got people's hopes up a little bit too much. And once people saw that, there was no turning back from that. I mean, there's no accepting that maybe he isn't ready. Maybe he's not quite where he needs to be to win a 4-quarter game. Like, if he can come in, a couple drives, great, throw a great ball. He's got the arm, he's got all the tools and everything like that. But people don't want to allow themselves to see that on the development track, he's not quite where he needs to be. And you ask anybody in that building, we've asked players, we've asked, put Franklin aside for a second. You ask anybody in that building, on record, off record, they're going to say he's just not there yet. Like, he's got tremendous talent. He's got tremendous abilities, and I think he's going to get there. I think he's going to be very good, but just in terms of what you can get out of him over a 4-quarter game, you mentioned the pressure with the injured offensive line and things like that. And maybe he's a guy that, plays better than he practices. I mean, I always look back to Zach Zwinak. Zach Zwinak was terrible in practice, but you put him in the game and he was awesome. He was just an absolute machine. Some guys are like that. Some guys are gamers. You typically don't see that sort of level of volatility with quarterbacks, but maybe Drew's that guy. But I will say this. I just think people are so excited by the prospect of him playing and the stars and everything like that behind him that they don't want to allow themselves to believe the reality of the situation, that he just might not be where they want him to be at this point.
And that is the great unknown for fans that is not really acknowledged in the conversation that we have regularly. Nick Shear says, missed last few live shows, excited for this one. Nick, glad to have you. If you've got any questions or comments, put them in the chat. We'll be getting to as many as we can tonight. And as always, like the video. Want to move on to the next thing, Nate. I see you chomping at the bit, but
his face is far too red for you to move on to the next thing.
You cannot do this. You cannot. All right. I got one. I know. We're going to get out of here. I got one. Here's the thing. It's not that Drew Aller is not there on the development track. It's that he's not at Sean Clifford, which I understand is like, again, where Sean Clifford is. People have a debate as to how good that is, but all of the ways that handicaps your offensive coordinator right? In terms of the breadth of knowledge that Sean Clifford has and the things that you can do, the adjustments that you can make, all of the things that he's prepared for, Drew Allard, the game plan has to be totally different. Like as you would expect, but it just limits what you can do in games that I don't think they necessarily see as the slam dunk that people want them to be. And so, yeah, that's it. I'm totally done. I'm just saying, none of this precludes Drew from getting tons of playing time over the next 4 weeks. He can get tons of playing time. It's just he's probably not going to be the starter, and it's time to come to grips with that. That's it.
Yeah,
I'm done.
The ironic thing is, and I've been looking at this and trying to parse this out. This is one of the three best 3-game stretches of Sean Clifford's career from an individual play perspective when you're considering just isolating his passing. And forget the other things. And if you can put down the 1-2 record in the last 2 games from a throw-to-throw perspective, he has been generating more offense for the team than the last 3 games than any 3-game stretch since 2019. And it's just they coincide with a 1-2 stretch, which obviously the quarterback is responsible for winning in a lot of people's minds. So that is neither here nor there. It's just an interesting note coming out of all of this stuff. Last night we were all at practice. I want to get your guys' observations. Fitz, you were with the defense. Big Base had a big presence last week. Any thoughts from yesterday at practice of any observations there, or what did you see at practice?
Once again, we got in with some special teams work, some ball security, things like that. So you're not seeing a bunch of that. I mean, it seems like they've made that change and put Curtis Jacobs out there at Sam and just going to go with Abdul Carter. And I think that's the right decision based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks. But in terms of like practice observations, there's a lot of I don't want to say half speed, but 3/4 speed drills and things like that. Some punch work and things like that. So nothing crazy. I will say I took away Zariah Fisher was out there and he just looks better every week, and not expecting him to play, not expecting him back this season, but to get him back in spring practice might be a nice little boost. And he's been out there, he's been flopping around, not doing full contact stuff, but to see him out there is a really good sign. I think defensive end continues to come along. They need more there. I think Denai Dennis Sutton's going to get better and contend for a starting spot next year. But at the same time, they're going to play 4 or 5 defensive ends, and hopefully you're confident in those guys. And Zariah Fisher was a guy that they had hoped could step in this year, maybe be a missing piece to that pass rush. And obviously with the injury, he was not able to do so. But other than that, it's there's not much to say from the defensive side of the practice field. It was loose. It was it was a nice little vibe last night. I will say. I know that the offense is kind of its own little world over there, but on the defensive side, things seem to be clicking well, and they're looking to move on. They're looking to get out of that funk where that offense, or excuse me, that Ohio State loss sticks with them as it has at times during the James Franklin's tenure. So that's just what they're preaching on the defensive side of the ball these days.
And with Zariah Fisher, you'd like to go to the portal and get a defensive end if you want one, but you don't want to have to go to the portal and get a defensive end. And I think, with that depth you talk about, that's something that this year they might not have to do in the offseason, pending whatever happens over the next 2 months. Nate, on the offense, we've hinted at it already. You've already laid out what's coming this weekend. So what do you see from the offense? You were with them in the offensive line. What's the situation in front of Sean Clifford?
Pain.
That made me actually laugh. Okay, let's move on to the preview then.
Look, it's a problem. It's a problem. Olufashanu was not at practice. Caden Wallace was at practice. We didn't see him doing anything strenuous. Let's go through this whole Sal Wormley didn't see at practice. Landon Tengwall did not see at practice. And so Drew Scruggs is potentially the only starter at the beginning of the season on the offensive line that will start on Saturday for Penn State. And so, you know how these things go at Penn State. We'll see, right? But I do think that it is fair to say, guys who we have not seen on Wednesday, I cannot think of any this season who we've seen playing games. right? Like,
Yeah.
if they are absent, if we have not seen them on Wednesday, it's been very rare. Now, obviously, if Olufoshanu was available on Saturday, you're going to play him whether he practiced or not. But
Right.
I just think it's you can't stress it enough, right? That this is a makeshift offensive line, that they're really plumbing kind of the depths, and they're going to have to figure some stuff out, right? I mean, they've got guys who I think probably appear to be better options necessarily than some of the guys who are slotted in front of them.
Yeah.
But they're trying to preserve red shirts in some cases. And so it's this balancing act right now of decisions to make, of who can you spend a red shirt? Who do you want to maintain that red shirt? Who still has the wiggle room?
Right. How many games do you want to save for later?
Yep.
Because that's another factor in it too, is maybe guys aren't there yet, but come bowl season, if there is an area they need to have somebody step up, they want to be able to do that and preserve that red shirt. Is there a combination, maybe not of players, but is there a combination that you think can get them through this game without serious problems? Like from what you've seen, or is this headed towards what we all thought it was, when if one of your tackles goes down, you're in trouble, and both of them weren't at practice yesterday? So what's your gauge of danger level this coming week?
I mean, like, the offensive line was already danger level, just to a certain respect, right? It was already a unit that you weren't, it wasn't the strongest in the world. They had made strides, that was undeniable, but there was always that sense of risk of, what's going to happen? Or is the quarterback going to get in trouble and get hurt? Look, I think Drew Shelton is maybe the guy at left tackle if you have to go there. You still want to keep his red shirt if you possibly can. And I think it doesn't spend his red shirt to use him in this game, I believe.
That's correct.
Right.
All three of those guys sit at 2 with JB Nelson, Shelton, and Vegione. And it's very interesting. I think Nelson's probably the most interesting one, because you can play Shelton, and if he's as good as you think, maybe he doesn't stay 5 years. Probably say the same about Ione. But JB Nelson's so interesting because you have this first year specifically to bulk him up or get him Big Ten strong compared to junior college. And if he plays this year, then you either spend another year, spend next year redshirting, or just you only get 2 years with him. So that's the interesting one to me. Like, playing the freshman, obviously not ideal, but at the same time, you get a little bit more of a cushion there. So JB Nelson's, I think, the interesting one. They used him earlier this year. They seem to like what they saw. But, if you play him and you burn his red shirt, that's essentially limiting his career, limiting your outlook, not for the next 5 years, but for the next 2 years.
That's actually, it's interesting. I thought about it the other way, and prioritizing guys that were highly recruited in the class versus a guy who came in JUCO. Not saying he's any better or worse, but he's older. But that's a very good point to make there. Let's get into any final thoughts on practice. We need to get into the actual preview of Indiana. Any final thoughts from either of you? Something you saw you wanted to make sure we talked about tonight?
No Kevon Lee as well. So that running back depth continues to be thin if he's not available. Obviously, James Franklin said on Tuesday that they had hoped to have him back on Saturday, but we'll see. We'll get to it. It's fine.
Well, Stephen Light's here, and he says, in case you guys didn't have candy on Monday night, he gives us a donation to the channel. Stephen, always here, always contributing. Appreciate you, my guy. This is an interesting question. We're going to get into it now. Steve says Indiana should not be in the same class with PSU depth, no matter if they are freshmen. I think that's a little bit unrealistic, but I understand the confidence that Penn State should win this game. So let's get into it. Fitz, let's talk about the offense. What do you make of this unit, and what have you seen from them when you've watched them on film?
Indiana, very interesting. Can't run the ball. They really, this whole program has been really interesting, because I thought Tom Allen was ready to turn a corner back in 2020. Of course, beat Penn State that year to open the season, and they've just kind of fallen flat. They have a tough time blocking people. They have lost their top wide receiver, Connor Bazelak, the quarterback. He will air it out, absolutely, and that's kind of going to have to be what they do if they're going to have success against Penn State, is try and go down the field and try to get chunk plays. 381 passing attempts. I mean, that's more than Purdue, which says a lot about about how you work through the Big Ten if you're Indiana.
A little frightening.
Yeah, so I think they're gonna throw the ball a lot. Emory Simmons, a familiar name for Penn State fans, who's committed to Penn State for a little while, ended up going to North Carolina and then transferring to Indiana, where I think he was originally committed. So it's a giant circle, and Penn State is just a little exit ramp on that one. But RPO, read option, that sort of thing. The offensive line, I think their offensive line is also hurt. Like, and to Steven's point, I don't think they are in Penn State's class in terms of depth, even freshmen, all that kind of stuff. I was talking to Zach Osterman, who we had on the show yesterday, and he's curious if they can maybe, I don't want to say make a change at quarterback, but see what they've got out there and see they're basically playing for the rest of this year and going into the portal to see what they need on the offensive line, to see if they have to go get another quarterback and see how things work out, because they're in trouble right now in terms of offensively. So be curious to see how much they're able to run a cohesive offense. It's been sputtering at times and it's really hurt them, and then they get behind and then they're in trouble. So from a talent perspective, Penn State definitely should have the advantage, especially with their defense. I mean, we're talking about all these injuries, but they're on the offensive side of the ball for Penn State. Penn State's defense should be in really good shape this weekend.
Yeah. What about the quarterback situation? Because what Zach talked about, and I know you talked to him separately, was that running threat might add an element here. How much do you think that can play a factor in this game if coming out of the bye week that they get a surprise like a different quarterback?
I don't know that Tom Allen would make that switch. I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's like the Clifford thing, but you know, Connor has not been horrible. I know he's put up some numbers and things like that. I'm not sure that he's the reason that they are having the problems that they are having. So I don't really see a switch there, but I mean, it's certainly possible that Dexter Williams II, I was struggling for his name there for a second, can just provide you something different. And when you've got injuries on the offensive line, when you can't block anybody and you need a spark, sometimes a running quarterback's the easiest thing. It's not necessarily going to tear Penn State's secondary apart, and I don't think the starter is going to do that either, but gives you a chance to make something out of nothing.
Generally, teams coming off buys tend to have something to throw at a team. Nate, how concerned are you? Penn State's banged up coming into this game in one key area, but just the team in general, how concerned are you of a team coming off a bye week that has an air of desperation about it and on a 5-game losing streak after starting 3-0? And as Fitz pointed out, Tom Allen was poised to do something, and it feels like it's really taken a huge step back the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I'm going to skip to the conclusion, right? I'm going to pick Penn State to win this game. I picked Penn State to win this game. I think that the danger for Penn State is not losing a 35-31 game. It's losing a 17-14 game, right? If all of the weather predictions and prognostications are for this intense wind, right, and passing the ball becomes complicated, like, let's just be honest about this. Let's just be, no one's going to care, but let's just be honest about what we've seen from Penn State in some of these situations over the past couple of years, right? These weird weather circumstances I can't think of any of them that Penn State has played particularly well in, right? Whether it's at Michigan State, the rain game, the snow last year, Northwestern, obviously earlier this year, like you name it, these have been some of the games that have stymied Penn State. So if I'm looking at that, and we've got this weather, and you've got a defensive coach who has had 2 weeks to dream up something against Penn State, against the Penn State offensive line that isn't great, against a quarterback who makes backbreaking mistakes. Like that's the blueprint.
That's the nightmare scenario
for Indiana. That's the nightmare scenario. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, and there's a great chance that Penn State can just run it down their throats anyway. Right, that you have these game-breaking running backs. But I do think that it is going to take a certain amount of individual playmaking, like this steady drumbeat of, hey, we're just going to maturity you to death, is to me not necessarily realistic for this game. It's a matter of, hey, can Nick Singleton make a play? Can Parker Washington make a play? And go from there and build up a lead to the point where if Penn State has a lead in this game, it's hard for me to conceive of Indiana having an avenue toward keeping up.
Fitz, you said that Indiana can't run the ball, and that's dead on accurate. But the running backs don't seem terrible. Do you find them to be something that can challenge Penn State if one of them gets one-on-one with a middle linebacker in open space?
Yeah, I mean they've had success the last couple of years with some really good backs, and I'm not sure that they're on that level, but yeah, I mean it's one of those things. I think it's more about the offensive line, more about what they can't do versus what these running backs can't do, and I don't know that they terrify anyone. I mean, Penn State saw better backs last week, saw a better back the week before, saw two better backs, the week before that. So I don't think anything comparing them to what Penn State's seen over the last 3 weeks. So I think it's more about the offensive line. I think you can be aggressive. I was unaware of the forecast, the weather forecast. That's an interesting one to me because Penn State seems to play defense against the elements more than a lot of programs. And it's out and out frustrating to watch sometimes because you're worried about the wind, you're worried about the rain and things like that. And it's really just like, okay, well, it's clearly affecting one team more than the other. I don't know that that's going to be something that tilts this game, but I think Penn State should be able to counter and run the football. But back to your original question about Indiana's running backs. No, I think they're solid, but I think the running game as a whole is something that's not overly impressive, but it is better than a run defense, so that's good.
Yeah, so let's get to the defense because I think that one of the areas that we all feel pretty confident in is Penn State defending that side of the ball. But defensively, this is a team that has frustrated Sean Clifford over the years. 3 interceptions against Indiana in 3 seasons. What has happened to this defense this year, Fitz? Because it's not the same one that I've seen on film over the last couple of seasons.
They got issues everywhere. I'm not sure that they have the athletes to play the style that they wanted for that really good run that Tom Allen had. And to be honest with you, a really good run at IU is different than a really good run at Penn State, Ohio State, whatever.
Yeah.
But they did a really good job finding the athletes that they needed to play the scheme that they wanted. And I just don't think they can do that this time. Not forcing turnovers, not creating pressure. There's a lot of knots in this defense. And that's why I believe they are, 14th out of 14 in the Big Ten in scoring defense, worse than Nebraska, which given how Nebraska started the season is an accomplishment in itself. And I think the yards will be there. It's about finishing. It's about Penn State being the team that can, just go out there and turn to Nick Singleton. I think suffice to say, I think this is a game that Nick Singleton can get outside. And I think we know what that means by now. Katron Allen, I think, has been phenomenal. Really enjoyed watching him run. But if you can get Nick Singleton outside against some of the athletes or lack of athletes that Indiana has at some spots, and they're banged up as well on both sides of the ball, then I think you've got an opportunity to run the football.
106 missed tackles, tied for the most in the Big Ten. That's been an issue for them without generating those turnovers, and Fitz underlined that pretty well. C. Paul King says, great insight on the QB and the O-line situation. Will we get to a New Year's Bowl? I'm going to get to this question. That can be one of our questions to leave the show with. I do want to get to some of the other situations because more injuries on this side of the ball for Indiana. I believe it is Cam Jones is questionable, maybe won't play. But it seems pretty buttoned up that this is going to be a successful game for Penn State from the analysis I'm getting from you guys. So what other things stand out on that side of the ball, Fitz, that maybe you want to highlight before we get into some of the other ancillary conversations outside of the team and the players on the field?
You mentioned the injuries. It's November in the Big Ten. Everybody's going to have injuries, and kind of what we talked about with that depth gap that we saw last week between Ohio State and Penn State. Penn State's going to have that over a lot of teams in the Big Ten, and I think that's what you're going to see. They're struggling right now, and given what we've seen in the past, coming off of losses to Ohio State, and this is a big picture thing, not really the Indiana defense type thing, but it's a good team to play if you're trying to regain yourself. Because even with a hangover, you should have the matchup and advantages that you want to put some points up on the board and come out fairly comfortable. I know it's a 2-touchdown line or something like that, but you should be pretty comfortable on Saturday. You never want to underestimate your opponent, of course, but just looking at the matchups, you just check boxes on Penn State all the way down.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was that you can suffocate this team, but you can't fall asleep against this offense because they will go over the top, as you pointed out at the beginning of the breakdown of they'll be aggressive and throw the ball down the field. Let's get to it then. Predictions. Fitz, we'll start with you. What do you think this game ends up being?
I like the comment there. Yeah, just go there and beat the crap out of them. That should you should got a coach over there. No, I like Penn State to be able to score some points. As I mentioned, didn't really look at the weather report or anything like that. I have Penn State 41-14, I believe it is. I think Penn State's just altogether better, and I think this is one where these points can rack up, and you can get a turnover, you can get a pick six or something like that. I know it's on the road, I know it's something different. You've got the opportunity to create pressure. Last week, Penn State's defensive line didn't do a great job. Said they couldn't get home with 4. They have potential to get home with 4 this week. So I'm curious to see what Manny Diaz does in terms of his coverages, in terms of what he does, in the slot with Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy, and those guys, and what he does with his linebackers to get after Indiana's quarterback. It's an opportunity for this defense to sort of impose its will. I think they've been good, and I think they can have a great day on Saturday.
Nate, is this going to be a cosmetic win, or is this going to be another ugly one where they get the W and everyone's unhappy about it?
Oh man, I don't know. I've seen a lot of ugly football over the years, and I think that it's important to prioritize that with a win over looking pretty and losing. And so, I understand what the conversation is, but I just think it is imperative that Penn State come out of this game with a win. They have to excise the demons of 2020. There's a lot, to me, involved in this game, and being able to come out of a loss and get a win. All of those things I think are important. But I kind of think it's going to be ugly. I don't see 45 points. I think that if Penn State's defense is able to give multiple short fields or score a touchdown, that makes life a lot easier for Penn State's offense. But I do think that there is, I don't want to downplay some of the advancements that Penn State's offense has made over the last 2 weeks, but I'm just going to remain in the camp of it needs to be consistent before I believe it's the truth.
See, they lost pretty last week, and I believed in them. I wrote that this week. I trust this offense now, and you have me terrified that I did that. So
I don't know.
Let's go to C. Paul King to end the show. A little bit of a look forward. Do they get the 10 wins? Does this look good for them with a good loss to Ohio State? And do they get to a New Year's Six bowl?
Yeah,
Nate?
I mean, if they win 10 games, I would be stunned if Penn State did not get into a New Year's Six bowl, just because they're 15 right now in the early rankings. Teams are going to fall in front of them. I have to think they have from an FPI standpoint, one of the easier schedules remaining. You've gotten Ohio State out of the way, you've got Michigan out of the way, so you have every opportunity. Nate, the way to say that earlier in the show is they're going to be favored against every opponent that they go against, and I think that's the way you look. And if they take care of business and win out, I think it's going to be very hard, especially with that loss where they look good for so long against Ohio State, who's going to be by that time going to be the number 1, number 2 team in the country. Then I think that's, I don't want to say inevitable, but if they take care of business, they should end up back there.
Yeah. No, it is one of the easier FPIs remaining, but is one of the harder FPIs, period. Strength of schedule. Right. And so when your 2 losses are against 2 top 5 teams, that's going to be rewarded. Right. I think. What are you laughing at? Anyway,
I'm laughing at the guy that says if Nate sets the line, then it might be different. No, you're right. Because if it's well, here's the thing: they lost ugly against Michigan, which is even though it's a top 5 team, it's a demerit. You're going to lose points for that. But Ohio State, who is ranked higher, you look better against, and you really showed that you can hang with top teams. And we've seen a lot of in these college football rankings that come out around Halloween. Teams just drop, magically all of a sudden lose 2 or 3 games on the remaining schedule. Penn State does not seem to be in that general danger. Having said that, Maryland's going to be tough. Michigan State's going to be tough. You should be fine at Rutgers, should be fine against Indiana, which is interesting because we're talking about the games on the road as the ones you should be fine, and the games at home as maybe toss-ups, just because James Franklin's record against Michigan State, and then Maryland can hurt you in certain ways. So we'll see what happens. But I think they're just in a really good spot. And like I said, that loss, I think, sets them up for New Year's Six Bowl.
It should be a fascinating end of the season. Nate, last thing before we get
I'm done. I promise. No, I think it's this very fascinating precipice that the program is on, where fans generally seem to be disinterested now that they have 2 losses, or not disinterested, but like
disgruntled,
what have you. And yet those games that the point that you just made, Fitz, becomes such an unbelievably important thing moving forward, that Penn State, the best things that Penn State football has going for it is its home field advantage, right? And if fans don't show up to Michigan State after Thanksgiving and Maryland at home in what's not going to be a night game, but like a day game, then those things, nobody's blaming anybody for anything. I'm just saying it could be a very interesting situation where the one thing that Penn State has going for it, or one of the bigger things that Penn State has going for it, it won't have because fans are so frustrated with the performance of the team.
We'll see how they feel after this game against Indiana coming up this weekend. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We'll round out the BWI Daily Edition for the week, and then the post-game show coming up directly after Penn State and Indiana. I'll be breaking down everything that happened, riding solo again, so I'm going to need you. Come join me on the post-game. You are my co-host, you in the audience. We'll talk. We'll go through the Sean Clifford fatigue, anything that happens during the game, or I'll point out all the good things that happened in a blowout. We'll find out together on Saturday. And one last thing, please make sure you check out the rest of our videos. These guys do an awesome job with our instant analysis on the field, giving their thoughts of what happened. Make sure you like and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, and of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said earlier this week, we are a rocket ship, but you are the fuel that's going to get us there. That'll do it today for the BWI Daily. Enjoy your Major League Sports tonight, whatever your flavor is. We'll talk to you tomorrow.